As a small child, the world is a strange place, filled with strange things. I mean, as a small child, our perceptives and our perspectives are distorted. Or perhaps we just don't understand the reasonings behind the hate, the injustice, the discrimination. On a clear summer day, and sometimes in the 1950s, in Pasadena, California, my grandfather took my sisters and I on a walk. This area was well known for the rich white folk and the paradise of mansions and the Rose Bowl parade. My grandfather was an Irish descendant, and as he was walking us through Brookside Park, people glared at us, and they'd glance at him, and then they'd glance at their companions, and they'd whisper. And I asked my grandfather, "Why are they staring at us like that?" And he simply replied, "Don't worry about it. If you don't understand now, then that's a good thing." And he took me in his arms, and he kissed my forehead, and continued on walking. What I didn't know then, but what I know now, was that those people were glaring at this beautifully handsome white man with shining reddish-brown hair and crystal blue eyes because he was holding the hand of a child that had hazel eyes, the prettiest dress anyone ever did see, and caramel skin darker than the cream that they drank with their morning coffee. They were glaring at me as a child at just 6 years old. Now, my granddaddy lived in possibly the highest end of town. You could say it was a mansion. Heck, it was better than the houses that we saw in Gone with the Wind. The driveway was miles long, and in fact, you even had to drive through a tunnel under a bridge to get to the house. In fact, the house was so big, so gigantic, that it had more than 3 chimneys, 2 kitchens, 5 bedrooms, and a wraparound porch just upstairs. My grandfather had a soft spot for bowls full of iced milk, family, and my grandmother. He loved my grandmother. But in society's eyes, it was a terrible crime. You see, when he bought his house, he couldn't even take her with him, because if he did, they wouldn't let him buy it. Every day, when she went from work to home, she rode a bus, just so people wouldn't know that she was there, that she was living with the white man. She had a Native American background that gave her golden skin and sun-kissed eyes. For such a quiet and gentle, loving man, he chose a spitfire of a woman. But she saved my life one summer. Or, at least, she saved my life in the way that any 13-year-old would see it. You see, when I was 13, my sisters had developed way before I had, and so all the boys flocked to them. They played this game called Hide and Go Get It, where the girls would hide and the boys, if they found you, they got to kiss you. But I wasn't allowed to play. And for some reason, because of this reason, my aunt wouldn't let me stay with her, and so my grandmother, she volunteered me to stay at her house to help her. And she, of course, declared that I was the best at anything, and that I could help her the most. And because of this reason, I love my grandmother so much more. While my grandfather only spoke when something was needed to be said, my grandmother spoke when things needed to be done, or at least when she thought things needed to be done. She was very authoritative. She even taught me how to sweep the floor once. she'd always tell me, chin up, shoulders back, head held high. Because of my grandmother, I became the swan instead of the ugly duckling that I thought I was. And I love her for that. My grandparents always taught me everyone comes from different shapes, sizes, and races. But that doesn't matter. Everyone has a value, and they all have something to say. A time when I really had nothing to say, though, was when a time I was speechless. We were in town that we lived in, where we were probably the most well-mannered, well-dressed women in high school. And we were offered a chance to play in our local college cheerleading performance during a game. We went to my mother's store to ask her if we could, perform. And as we quietly waited in line, trying to contain our excitement, a little old white lady who had this sinister look in her eyes just turned to us and said, "Oh my word, niggers! Never in my life have I ever been called a nigger, or a nigger, or any other discriminating word such as that one." My mother turned to that woman and said, "Why, didn't you know? These beautifully intelligent young ladies are my daughters." The lady was so flustered and frustrated that she left without grabbing any of her things. And we never saw her around that store again. And I mean, maybe my grandmother and my grandfather were right. I mean, not understanding was a good thing. Because moments like that, where people glared at you just because you had skin darker than theirs, hurts. I mean, and that wasn't the only time it hurt either. When I met my future husband's family, I was resented because of the way I spoke and the way I dressed. It wasn't until they met my mother that they truly understood that this was just how I was born, how I was raised, and how I will always be. And I am proud of where I am today and how I got here. And I would change nothing for it. I am retired, living the life that most people would have dreamed of. And I would never take it back. And that is the story and the life of the Swan.